When the 2004 Boxing Day tsunami struck Sri Lanka, over 30,000 people were killed. Millions were left homeless. The disaster took an incredible toll on a country already battered by 2 decades of civil war. A war that's taken more than 60,000 lives, double the number lost to the tsunami. It's little known that during the conflict, tens of thousands of people were arrested and never seen again. They have simply disappeared. Only Iraq under Saddam Hussein has had more people go missing. Thousands of Sri Lankans are still looking for loved ones, lost before the natural disaster. They're victims of a silent political tsunami that swept the country for over 20 years. Once known as Ceylon, Sri Lanka was a British colony for 150 years. After independence in 1948, the Sinhalese majority, based in the south, took control of the government and everything else, from the best jobs, the official language, and religion, Buddhism. The Hindu minority Tamils in the north and east pushed back. In the 1970s, the militant Tamil Tigers began fighting for independence and their own homeland. The government passed the Prevention of Terrorism Act in 1979. This act gave government forces the power to arrest and imprison anyone suspected of supporting the Tamil Tigers. It's believed that as many as 30,000 people in the north and east of Sri Lanka went missing. Most were killed, buried in mass graves. The government had used similar tactics in crushing a Marxist rebellion in the south within the majority Sinhalese population. As many as 30,000 more disappeared. Mrs. Tamavani lives outside Batikalo in the northeast. Nearly 100 people in her family died in the 2004 tsunami. But it's her husband's disappearance 15 years earlier that Mrs. Tamavani cannot put behind her. Before the war broke out, Mrs. Tamavani lived a comfortable life. She and her husband owned a beautiful home and were raising their small children. The army forced them to leave their house. Mrs. Tamavani's home is now a tin hut she shares with her mother and daughter. In 1990, government forces were escalating their assault on the Tamil Tigers. Entire villages were bombed. Civilians like Mrs. Tamavani and her family were caught in the crossfire. They fled, along with 40,000 others, to the Eastern University campus in Vandaramulai. In the early morning of September 5th, 1990, the Sri Lankan army surrounded the campus. Soldiers seized 158 men they suspected of supporting the Tamil Tigers. Mrs. Tamavani's husband was one of them. None of the 158 men have ever been seen again. Dr. Tangamuttu Jayasingham was the rector of the Eastern University and was there the morning of September 5th.
So this whole area was actually a refugee camp. I mean, you can imagine having 40,000 people. They came here about morning 5 o'clock or 5:30, and they practically surrounded the entire building. And they then called for us. After we came, only then the entire operation started. We say you had all the people, more or less everyone in the grounds, and then coming in rows where you had people to identify, some masked and some unmasked, and they were just passing through that. And anyone suspected or anyone said yes or nodded the head, and then what happened is they were taken aside and they were taken outside the wall. They just said they are taking them for inquiry and they'll be released as soon as that is over. And to this day, well, we haven't seen them.
Mr. Rasanayagam and his family were also at the Eastern University that day. His son, Shanmunayagam, was taken away by the soldiers.
பிறகு எல்லாம் போனது பிறகு மேடம் போய் கேட்டோம் அவங்க விசாரிச்சு போட்டு விடுவாங்க கொண்டு போறாங்க அதையும் போய் பார்த்துட்டு நான் கொஞ்சம் தூரம் போனோம் வந்தாருமில்ல கொஞ்சம் தூரம் நடந்து போகணும் ஆக்கள் வருவாங்க கூட்டிட்டு போக வேண்டிய வரல இப்படியே வந்திருக்கோம்.
When his son didn't come home, Mr. Rasanayagam wrote to the Sri Lankan government and army pleading for help. The army sent him a letter asserting no one was detained. Mr. Rasanayagam's story is common in Sri Lanka. There's hardly a family that hasn't been touched by the disappearances.
I think disappearances is perhaps the biggest human rights issue in the context of Sri Lanka, and I think it's Sri Lanka's greatest shame. If we had a major shame with regard to human rights, it's the problem of disappearances. It has totally destroyed the very fabric of our society.
In the 1990s, 4 separate presidential commissions investigated the disappearances. They identified the perpetrators responsible for the atrocities. But since then, little has been done to bring those responsible to justice.
The majority have never really been prosecuted, and it's a pity because in some of these cases there's very good evidence. Although it's so long ago, there is still, whole villages of people who know exactly who did it because they saw these people and they knew these people from before. So they can identify people, but unfortunately nothing's happened.
This is really the impunity the military is enjoying. They had been enjoying impunity under the previous laws known as the Prevention of Terrorism Act, the PTA, and the emergency regulations. They had been given all sort of impunity under this act. They can arrest anybody without a warrant. They can detain them for months without any warrant or any detention. This is the real reason for human rights violations in the eastern part of Sri Lanka at that time.
With no word from the government, many Tamils with missing loved ones like Mr. Rasanayagam have been left with no other choice but to turn to oracles. Oracles are believed to embody the spirit of the Hindu goddess Kali. The faithful turn to them to solve life and death problems. Today, Mr. Rasanayagam is hoping an oracle can give him information about his son. The oracles meet with people once a year. Some offer healing rituals, others offer guidance. Most have ordinary jobs as grocers, electricians, mill workers, or weavers. But they're all specially trained to serve as oracles. Mr. Rasanayagam has waited all day, and he's finally getting his chance to meet with an oracle.
ரெண்டு விடைய மாத்தா வந்தனா ரெண்டு விஷயம் சொல்லிருக்கீங்க
மயனே என்னுடைய பிள்ளை
ரெண்டு விஷயத்தை எனக்கு வெளிப்படையா சொன்னார். ஒன்று எனது 2 கண்ணும் ஆபரேஷன் இருந்தது அவருக்கு தெரியாது, தெய்வத்துக்கு தெரியும்.
சந்தோஷமான முறையில் இருந்தாத்தான் இருக்குன்னு சொல்ல வேண்டாம். இப்ப ஓரளவு
நல்லா
தெளிவாரிச்சாடா மயனி,
தெளிவா இருக்கு. அவர் அதை கண்டுபிடிச்சு எனக்கு சொன்னார். இந்த கண் பார்வையும் இப்போ வந்து கொண்டு இருக்குது, இப்போ எப்படி என்று சொல்லி அதுக்கு தக்க சிகிச்சையை செய்து என்னை பார்வையை பார்க்க சொன்னார். மங்கள் இல்லாமல் இருந்து நான் கண்ணாடி போட்டு தான் பார்க்கறது, கண்ணாடி போடாமல் பார்த்தா 3 நல்ல ஃபேஸ் மதிக்கலாம். இது வேல்முருகு, இது மெண்டிஸ் என்று மதிக்கக்கூடியதாக இருந்தது. 2வது விஷயம் அவரே சொன்னார், ஒரு குஞ்சானா பிள்ளை
என்னுடைய தன்னுடைய உடல்நிலையில
பிள்ளைய நினைச்சு கொண்டிருக்கிறாள். அவருக்கு ஹொரோஸ்கோப் எழுதப்பட்டிருக்குது. 18 வயதில் ஒரு தத்து உண்டு. அந்த 18 வயதுதான் அவர் அரெஸ்ட் பண்ணப்பட்டார். அந்த 18 வயதில் அவர் பிடிக்கப்பட்டார். மீண்டும் அவர் அதை சொன்னார், உனது பக்தி சிரத்தையால அந்த பிள்ளை உயிரோடு இருக்குது, அந்த பிள்ளை அந்த ஜீவன் உயிரோடு இருக்குது, உனக்கு வந்து சேரும் என்ற பதிலை எனக்கு தந்திருக்கிறார்.
Sinhalese families in the south of the country are also waiting for the return of their loved ones from the war. In Kandy, known as the Buddhist heartland of Sri Lanka, Visakha Dharmadasa is still looking for her son.
This is my second son, who is the one who is reported missing, and for whom that I'm really waiting to return.
Achinte went missing in 1998. He was 21 years old. When the Tamil Tigers attacked his army camp, more than 1,500 soldiers were killed. Achinte and 700 others were declared missing in action.
Chocolates that I give him for my son, his share will be kept for him. It will be there. I really do hope that he will come one day to eat them. Thousands of pages or days of speaking never can explain the pain that the family goes through. It's day in and day out, every moment, every minute, every second of 24 hours, you wait for the return of this person, and that's very, very difficult for a family.
Dharmadasa has found her own way to take action. She's organized a spiritual pilgrimage with a political message. 200 mothers of the missing from both sides are coming together. We're traveling to Trincomalee in the northeast. They'll visit some of the most significant spiritual sites for 3 of the country's major religions: Buddhism, Hinduism, and Christianity. It's one of the first times that women, divided as enemies during the war, have come together in the search for the missing.
I feel it's very important to bring the women from different parts of the country together so that they can share their experience and learn from each other. In Sri Lanka, the biggest problem we see is that there's a very big communication gap. People don't know about the others. They always think that the other side is greener, the other people have more. This is the main problem we see in this country, and especially for this conflict also.
It's late when the women finally arrive in Trincomalee. The women can't afford to stay in hotels, so they spend the night in a local school. The next morning, the women rise early and head to Konaswaram Temple. It's one of the country's most sacred Hindu sites. Some of the worst fighting during the war took place in this part of the country. This area is still contested by the Tamil Tigers and the Sri Lankan government. The women come from different faiths, but on this trip, they all take part in each other's rituals. From the temple, the women head to a Catholic church. Mrs. Fernando's son was arrested and disappeared by the Sri Lankan army nearly 10 years ago.
ஆனா பிள்ளை இருக்கிறாருன்ற ஒரு நம்பிக்கை எனக்கு மனதில் இருக்கு. அவர் நடுவிலும் என்னன்னா கனவுல கண்டு கொண்டே இருக்கிறார். அவர் இருக்கிறார்.
ஐயோ என்ன பிள்ளை காட்டணும். ஐயோ என்ன பிள்ளை காட்டணும்.
The women begin sharing photographs of their missing loved ones.
They're exchanging the details of the missing children from each other, from Jaffna, from the south as well, from Batty and Trinco. All people who is missing, and also they're exchanging the details.
The women from the north and south speak different languages. A translator is there when words are required. Families are rarely reunited with the missing, but until there's confirmation that loved ones are dead, most will hang on to any shred of hope.
How's the day going so far?
Good, really, really good.
Any surprises? Good surprises?
Yes, because her son is seen by her, so we are just still working on that. It's too premature to speak anything we will see about.
Where did she see her son?
In Shava Kacheri, that's what we are trying to see. Yeah, okay.
There are other rare cases that light up people's hopes. This Tamil man says he escaped from a Sri Lankan army camp in the south, where he was imprisoned and tortured for 15 years.
It's an unusual case. We have never heard. In fact, the people have granted them to be dead. People feel that they cannot have survived such a long period of ordeal.
படிக்கல்ல இருந்து நாங்க ஒரு வருஷத்துக்கிட்ட நாங்க படிக்கல்ல இருந்திக்கிறோம். இன்னும் பிற்பாடங்களை கொண்டு போனாங்க காளிக்கு. இன்னைக்கு வரைக்கும் நாங்க காளி தான் இருக்கிறோம். எங்களை செஞ்ச இது யாருக்குமே செய்யல. நாங்க இன்னைக்கு அங்க நாங்க மரம் வெட்டி இன்னைக்கு தொழில் செய்றோம். ரப்பர் மரம் தான் வெட்டுறோம்.
What's even more shocking is that he's brought a list of names of other Tamil men he says are still being held in the same army camp.
He's giving the list of persons who are there. So since those papers are all torn to pieces.
How many people does he still believe are in
26 people. 26 names he has.
And these people are from where?
They are from Kokadichole, Chenkaladi, Chenegudi.
When word spread of his return, hundreds of families from across the northeast came to meet him. They hoped he'd have news of their own missing loved ones. To date, none of the men on the list have been found or released. A year after the tsunami, ongoing clashes are pushing the country back to the brink of all-out war. And disappearances at the hands of government forces have started again. In the 15 years that her husband has been missing, the only answers Mrs. Tamavani has gotten have been from the oracles. She keeps returning to them, hoping each time the news will be different. After 3 days of fruitless waiting at the temple, Mrs. Tamavani finally brings a gift. It will guarantee her an audience with an oracle. It's a silver tray with clothing, fruit, flowers, and even some cash. The oracle signals to Mrs. Tamavani that he's now ready to speak to her.
மனிதயவளின்றதொரு மதுரையர் பகையாய் வளருலகில் வந்துடவு நாகடம் புராணே வந்துடவு சிந்தனைகள் வானதற்போது மலைபாவியகளில் வானுரலங்கு பொந்திருரை சிந்திருரை புடைய நொடி விரியன் பொறிவளலை எரியரணை பக்க முதலாக நிகழ் செய்யாமல் எங்கொரு பரவாயில்ல இப்ப உண்மையான இந்த வாக்குமாவே கேட்கிறாங்க விளக்கமா கூட அதை பத்தி பரவாயில்ல மனைவி என்ன பண்ணாலும் விளக்கமா கூடாது எனக்கு தெரியும்
அவர் சொன்னால் அவங்க கொண்டு போய் கொஞ்ச நாளைக்கு பிறகு அவர் இல்லைன்னு சொல்லி அவருக்கு உரிய சடங்குகள் அது இது ஒன்று செய்யட்டுமா. ஆனால் இனிமேல் அதை பற்றி நினைக்கணும்.
அப்போ என்ன நடந்துச்சு சொல்லலை அவருக்கு
அடித்து அப்படி செஞ்சு தான் கொண்டு வைக்கிறாங்க.
அப்போ அதை பற்றி நீங்கள் அவங்க சொன்ன பதிலை பற்றி நீங்கள் என்ன நினைக்கிறீங்க? உங்களுக்கு எப்படி அது
இது வந்து என்னைய பொறுத்தளவில் நம்பிக்கை அந்த தெய்வம் மாடி சொல்கிறது ஒன்று எதிர்பார்த்து கொண்டு தான் இருக்கோம். எல்லாரும் அப்படி இப்படி என்று கதைக்கிறதா இருக்கிறா இல்லையான்றது கூடுதலாக ஆமி மேலிட்ட போய் கேட்டால் அங்கே வச்சுருக்கேன் இங்கே வச்சுருக்கேன் அப்படி இப்படி எல்லாம் சொல்கிறோம் தானே. அப்போ அதே 2 மணி இருக்காரா இல்லையா அப்படின்னு நான் சாத்திரம் கடவுளை உள்ள இருந்த காசில் ஒரு 3/4 கொடுத்துருக்கேன் சாத்திரம். ஆனால் இனிமேல் நான் கேட்கிறது எதுன்னு இல்லை. ஆனால் இனி அதுக்குரிய வேலைகளை செய்யணும். செஞ்சால் தான் எங்களுக்கு நல்லது கிடைக்கும்.
Thousands have come from across the northeast to Pune Chola Hindu temple. Firewalking is considered the ultimate act of spiritual purification. Mr. Rasanayagam believes that by walking across the coals, his prayers for his son's safe return will be answered.
அந்த நிம்மதியோட எனது மகன் என்னுடைய கைக்குள்ளே வந்து சேருவார் என்ற ஒரு நம்பிக்கை எனக்கு ஏற்பட்டிருக்கிறது.
Visakha Dharmadasa's pilgrimage is coming to an end. The women's last stop is to the ruins of one of Sri Lanka's oldest Buddhist temples, Valigam Vihara. It's one last moment to come together to pray for peace and answers.
What I want to say to the world is that as women, We don't feel as the others are as enemies. We want peace. We don't want our children to die anymore. That's simple as that. None of us want another woman to go through the same pain that we have gone through.
She wanted to establish a spiritual and political connection between Tamil and Sinhalese women, and she thinks that's exactly what has happened.
We will be working together for the next couple of months, and we hope so it will be a shorter time period until we exactly achieve a sustainable peace based on equality and justice and dignity to all the citizens of this country. So I'm really happy about that.
And concerning the missing, what is the most important thing that needs to be done now?
For the authorities to start opening up, to tell exactly what has happened. Good, thank you. Extremely careful, fall.